So, welcome to this episode of the Holistic Woman podcast with me, Kate Payne. And I've got today here Rebecca Rowe. Rebecca is a doctor of osteopathy, a WBFF pro with a passion for helping women train pain-free. She's a dedicated athlete herself and suffers from endometriosis and has somehow found a way to honor her needs as a woman whilst also training for the season and cycle that she is in. Her vision for women's wellness is for women to have energy and strength to live the life that they desire. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And we were just talking before we hit record that we've known each other for quite a few years now. We first met in sunny Queensland, and you were just moving in at that stage to strength training and this world of, do you call it bodybuilding? What do you call it?
Fitness modeling, fitness competing.
Yeah. And so you're really at the very beginning of your journey back then. And since then, you've lived all over the place and you now find yourself back in Melbourne. You've also competed overseas whilst also traversing moving into perimenopause and this diagnosis of endometriosis. So would love for you to firstly share from the 7 seasons which season you're currently experiencing, and then I'd love to hear the story of what led you into the strength training and how you've balanced that with the season that you find yourself in.
So I would say at the moment I'm in normal, they call it premenopause.
Perimenopause.
Perimenopause. Yeah. So I still have a regular cycle, but I do get hot flushes at night, get very hot.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I've definitely noticed. I'm 43. So things are definitely kind of, I think, starting to change, as you're probably aware. Perimenopause can go for say 10, 12 years. So small little changes can be occurring, from anywhere. They say 35 you can start having changes in symptoms. So I'd probably say around that perimenopause. However, with my competing, my hormone levels do change considerably. Last competition cycle, I lost my period several times. My hormones flatlined, my cortisol flatlined. So I was not in a very good space. Obviously, the end of bodybuilding comps are not the healthiest. It is, I suppose, quite critical to make sure you keep an eye on your blood work and where you're at, and then have strategies of making sure you get yourself back to optimal health again before you get ready to go again.
I think that's something that I've really enjoyed about watching your journey unfold, and you share so much of it on your Instagram page, and you're really open about those aspects of fitness modeling and bodybuilding that aren't the healthiest, but also you somehow manage to balance that with all of your knowledge as a holistic health practitioner, being an osteopath, having a real passion for women's health. And so what has been that journey for you in moving into the strength training and then finding aspects of that aren't the healthiest? What kind of things have you been doing, and how do you really start to nourish yourself as you move through those different seasons?
So I suppose for me, it's a lifestyle. So for me, it's not just eating Macca's or eating KFC. My whole approach is to eat the most nutritious food possible, and making sure that I'm nurturing my body or giving my body what it needs in each kind of, I suppose, season. So when we look at bodybuilding, you have like a build season, and then you'll have a so-called shred season, or you could call it an improvement season. So you still need to be feeding your body. Your body's like a car, so if we put the wrong fuel in it, it's not going to work properly. So again, timing of they say for women as well, timing of nutrients is more is more critical than men have a 21-hour window to eat food after training, whereas women only have like an hour window where they need to be consuming food after training. Also too, if we're going into more perimenopause, menopause, it's really important to consume protein, a good quality protein, before you train, and then also after you train. And it's also important to eat more protein. Again, that's helps with our building blocks or resynthesizing of our protein and our muscle in our body. So yeah, there are certain things that I suppose it's important to be aware of to get the best out of your body so that you are recovering. Okay, because I suppose while you're training, you're breaking down or creating small little tears. That's not when you actually get better. It's you train to create a stress on your body, and then during the recovery is when that your body improves, so that next time you have to deal with that stress again, you can deal with it better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute total sense.
Yeah.
Why bodybuilding for you? Why not marathon running or swimming?
I have run a marathon.
Have you?
Yeah. I actually, when I was in my 20s, I did half marathons. So I used to catch up with the girls and do running around the town at 5 a.m. And then they got into some of them were into marathon running. So I did 3 half marathons, and I'm like, right, if I do this half marathon really easy, I'm going to do a marathon. So I did do a marathon.
Good theory.
I did it in 4 hours and 2 minutes, I think. So
that's great.
Yeah, it was good. I think it's just, I've always been into sport. I've always loved a challenge. I'm very goal orientated. And so it actually kind of happened, and I had friends. So I had friends that were into fitness and bodybuilding comps when I was in my 20s, and I would always watch them and be like, oh, I'd love to do that. That's something I would love to do. And then when the opportunity arose, so when I moved to Queensland, I joined a gym, and the owner was ex-Mr. Victoria. And he basically said to me, would you like to compete in a bodybuilding comp? And I was just like, yep, let's go. He's like, right, we've got 16 weeks. And I already trained regularly. So I was already training at the gym, 4 or 5 times a week anyway, just because I love how it makes me feel. It makes me feel strong. It makes me feel powerful. It makes me, it gives me confidence in my body and its ability. And it also helped me with my work. So being an osteopath, I have to move people around. It's a physically active job. And when I don't train, my body suffers. So I always tell my clients they actually need to be stronger than what their life requires of them. Otherwise, their body's going to break down. So I'm always one to practice what I preach. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that embodiment piece. So from the women that you treat as patients, and I know you also now do some work with women in terms of strength training, when you see, if you look at the kind of broad section of women from menstruation all the way through to menopause, how do the requirements of strength training and what we need through those different seasons of when we're menstruating, then when we're moving through pregnancy, postpartum, and then into motherhood and then menopause, how does the need for different aspects of the strength shift and change for those different seasons?
So I suppose if we're looking at women when we're menstruating, menstruation affects women very differently. Some women go through menstruation and they actually feel better when they're moving. For myself personally, like you said, I was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2019. My period history has not been a great one. I didn't get my period until I was 21. So that's quite late. And was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it wasn't really, I suppose back then, again, if you look back 20 years ago, there wasn't as much, we didn't really have podcasts or as much information around, especially on women's health. So, what's polycystic ovarian syndrome? No idea. What do you do? No idea. Do we know about the different types of polycystic ovarian syndrome? No. And it wasn't even my doctor who picked it up. I went to like a beautician's appointment and she goes, oh, you've got a mark on your neck. That can be an indication you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I went to the doctor and he was like, are you pregnant? Are you this? Are you that? And it was just like, for someone that didn't really know much about female health or menstrual stuff, it was like a big shock to my system. And then I had to go get an internal ultrasound. That was another big shock. And they basically were like, oh, you've got 30 cysts on one ovaries, 40 cysts on the other ovaries. See you later. We can put you on the pill.
Yes.
And that was it. And so, I went on the pill. I put on weight. I got depressed. I hated my life, like literally hated my life. And it's like, that's your only option. You don't have any other support around you. So obviously I went off the pill. And then it was just a process of every kind of 40 days or whenever my period would arrive, it arrived. But also, if I look back at my life when in my 20s, I was binge drinking. I was, not really taking care of myself. And all those factors have a huge impact on females' menstrual cycle. So they say that your menstrual cycle should come regularly. It should be not painful. You should have bleeding for 2 to 7 days. The color of your period is really important. All these things should happen. And if they're not, then there's obviously a imbalance.
Yes. Okay.
So that imbalance could come from, poor gut health. This is a huge one. Again, an imbalance of hormones. Where does that come from? Possibly maybe poor liver health, inflammation due to an autoimmune condition or poor methylation or so many things that I think it's so important that if you are getting pain or are having problems, to make sure you reach out to a specialist or someone that specializes in, reading hormones and reading the whole lot. So, it's that menstrual cycle one for me, I get a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue. And for me, all I want to do is rest.
Okay. I'm the opposite in the sense that the first 1 to 2 days, I still have energy that I feel like I need to move. And so gentle movement and not the same kind of movement as if I wasn't bleeding, but definitely some movement. And then once I sort of get into day 3 or 4, the fatigue sort of starts to come in not a big wave, but definitely I start to feel like then, okay, things are slowing down. I'm moving into this more yin phase, this more time for nourishment. And so, again, the practice shifts and changes. So I like the way that you've said that it is so unique, because it
very
is
very unique.
And so for the 4 phases of the cycle, what's your recommendation? Obviously you moving through endometriosis will be completely different to women without endometriosis. So what does your strength training look like during the phases of your cycle? How does it shift and change? Obviously during bleed time, it's very restful.
Bleed time is pretty much, it's actually only the one day or maybe 2 days that I just pretty much do nothing. If I have to work, I have to work, but otherwise I'm literally in bed. And that has gotten better over time with obviously supplementation and changing nutrition. But pretty much my strength training actually stays the same. So I will just try, I have a pre-program and I will just go in and do my program, and I will try and do obviously better than I did the week before. That's what progressive overload is. However, there are some days that I just can't. And so, I will just listen to my body. And if I can't push that weight, I can't push that weight. And so I'll just drop my weight down and do what I can. So the plan is there, but sometimes the plan doesn't always go ahead because, again, the week before my period, I was getting a lot of fatigue. And it's just like, you just simply can't push what you did last week.
Yeah.
So
You just have to modify.
correct, it is.
Mm.
And yeah, like I said, everyone is very unique. So
Mhm.
obviously too, when you have ovulation, our estrogen is higher, our testosterone is higher. We do have, potentially more energy, but then there are some females that struggle around that ovulation time. So again, they will have pain and they might not be able to push as heavy. And also high estrogen affects our ligaments, so we can be a little bit more likely to get injuries for some women that do get more of a higher peak. So again, maybe sticking away from single leg exercise, or it's so individual, and it's so dependent on the female's injury history, how their body's working. Just it's very hard to be specific because
Yes.
we're all unique.
Yes. And it's just that reminder, isn't it, that we are unique and that we really need to have the tools to listen to our own individual bodies. And I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
those are the pieces that are really missing in our modern healthcare and in our Western society, is those tools to actually be able to listen and track one's own body as we move through different seasons or as we move through the different phases of the menstrual cycle. And then we know what support we need to reach out for, because if we don't
Correct.
even know how to read our own bodies, like your experience with PCOS, it's really hard then to reach out for support that you don't even really know that you require, but you've
That's it.
got this lifestyle that's not supportive of how you're feeling, and all of those pieces combined. So you've diagnosed with endometriosis in 2019. What was your journey to diagnosis? Because we know in Australia it can, 7-10+ years to formal endometriosis diagnosis. What was that journey like for you?
So basically, I was having problems with what was a potential inguinal hernia.
Okay.
And so I had to go get an ultrasound to get my hernia diagnosed, to see if it was torn or if it was just bulging through. So they did the ultrasound and they're like, we think you've got a cyst on your right ovary. And I was like, okay. So from there, I was recommended to go to a specialist who did what they call a DIE, it's a deep internal endometrial scan.
Okay. Yep.
With a specialist gynecologist.
Yeah.
And so they can now pretty much do an internal scan and recognize if you've got endometrial tissue or
Yes.
what type of it is. So the technology is there. I suppose it's just getting recommended to the
Right person.
the specialist, correct, the right person. So they diagnosed that I had a 6-7 centimeter cyst on my right ovary. It was called a chocolate cyst, which is linked into endometriosis, and potentially maybe some other endometrial tissue. So my gynecologist recommended I have surgery. And also, while I was having surgery, to go on the Mirena, because that had been shown to have a lot of success with reducing people's pain levels. So for me, I was also getting pain with sex. So the pain with sex was probably more problematic than the pain around, when I had my period or leading up to my period. So I spoke to a few of my friends. I didn't really want to get the Mirena. Again, I'd had bad experiences with the pill and contraceptives. So I spoke to a few friends, and one of my friends was just like, it's amazing. It's the best thing I've ever done. You should do it. So I was like, okay, if it can help with my pain, I'm going to do it. So I had the surgery and I got the Mirena implanted at the same time. I was also told that I could go back to work after 1 or 2 days after my surgery. And that just didn't happen. I didn't recover well from the surgery. I still had pain, and I still had, I was getting really depressed. So literally my boyfriend would come home and I would just be in tears. and just crying. So every day I would just cry. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And it's just, sorry, it's bringing back, not a happy time in my life. And so I kind of knew from then it was the Marina. I was just like, this isn't right. It has to be the Marina. Like, there's nothing else. So I rang up the gynecologist clinic and I'm like, look, I need to get this Marina out. And they're like, how long have you had it for? I'm like, 3 weeks. They're like, sorry, we normally leave it in for, it takes your body to regulate 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I hate my life. I just.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was just like, no, I'm just like, I hate my life. I want to die. And they're like, okay, let's make you an appointment. So I went to see the gynecologist. They took out the Marina. And that basically helped bring all my emotions back down to a more normal state. It didn't, however, get rid of the pain. Like, my pain was the same.
Right.
So there was no change.
Yes.
Surgery did not change my pain.
Yes.
The Marina did not change my pain. For me, it was supplementation and a change in my diet. So really dropping down inflammation, getting rid of all processed foods, getting rid of gluten, getting rid of dairy, even eggs, anything that's, histamine related, and just, going back to basics. So,
Wow. What a journey.
Big journey.
Yeah, big journey. And want to acknowledge your awareness of your own body in knowing that the Marina wasn't right, and not, to really trusting that own intuition of, no, it's the Marina. I need the Marina out, and pushing for that, because I know there are many women who don't have that body sovereignty or autonomy, and so would have waited the 6 weeks or potentially longer, or learned to live with this depression or this anxiety or all of these feelings of dread, because they've been told by a doctor that this is the way. And I think it's a really, it takes a really strong, resilient, sovereign woman to be able to say, no, this is not right for me, and I would like to have it removed, and following that process, particularly because something like endometriosis, PCOS, all of these menstrual health conditions can be so debilitating. And when it's taken, for many women, because it sounds like, you probably had the endometriosis for many years before that. And it's because it can be such a long journey and so debilitating. Women are tired. So by the time they get to that stage where they think that they're being given a solution, that perseverance, I can imagine, is, well, if I just hold out for a little bit longer, maybe this will work for me.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. But for me, it obviously wasn't the answer. Yes, it can still help other women. But I think, again, the drug that's in the pill that I had a reaction to the drug then, and the Marina is not, and they say it's localized to the uterus area or whatever. It's not.
How could it be?
It's not. It's systemic. Like, come on. So if you have a reaction to pills or birth control, then you're probably going to have a reaction to the Marina.
Yes.
So, and that's something I wish the gynecologist had said, the same drug that was you went off the pill, the same drug is in the Marina. I wasn't aware of that. I wish I had done a little bit more research, but anyway, you live and you learn.
Exactly. And so you spoke about nutrition. So how important is nutrition for women as we move through different seasons?
Incredibly amazing.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, when you go from into menopause, obviously our progesterone levels drop first, and then our estrogen levels drop again. Estrogen actually gives us access to better carbohydrate, or getting access to carbohydrate, and managing glucose. So when that's dropped, we don't have that there. And as well, without progesterone, our metabolism drops down. So every time you ovulate, progesterone's released, it kicks up your metabolism, and that's why you get a higher, you get a little bit hotter. So we've lost a bit of that as well. So we don't have the ability to control blood glucose sugar as well. And generally, because we're not producing progesterone, cortisol levels will go up as well. So to change your foods from being, I suppose, higher processed foods or, you know, quick acting carbohydrates to more of those slow carbohydrate sources is really important as well, because we don't have as much estrogen. Estrogen is really anabolic. So we actually need to be able to stimulate our body in different ways. So again, like I said at the start, having a higher amount of protein to create more stimulus. And then that's where the strength training comes in as well. Having that strength training, again, to stimulate our body to hold on to our lean muscle mass. So yeah, it does become more important. Otherwise, that's where you see as women get older, they put on more belly fat around. Again, that's higher cortisol or not being able to control our blood sugar levels. Yeah.
So with these kind of practices, we're able to start to reduce some of that. Is that what you're saying? Because I know there's a lot of women who move into the perimenopause phase, they start to put on weight or they struggle to lose the weight, even though they might have upped their exercise routine. So they might be doing more running or more cardio or more kind of HIIT training. And so, but my understanding is that if we swap that to what you're saying, which is more strength training, more focused on nutritional intake, that we can start to balance that out. And so really what has worked for us in our 20s and 30s and maybe into our early 40s, when we start to move into that perimenopause phase, we actually need to be in a position to really move things around.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose again, going back to recovery. So again, you put that stress on the body. It takes longer to recover. So, you know, you may need to look at shortening your training sessions or not training every day and giving your body, again, hit it hard, but then give your body a little bit more time to recover. So you might train, you know, on a Monday and then you might have a day off. Rather than, you know, training and then training and then training and then recovery. So yeah, they kind of, from all this work that Dr. Stacey Sims has done, is he's like lift heavy. So heavy, higher loads. So, you know, looking to lift as heavy as you can for 5 or 6 reps rather than that 15 to 20 reps. Yeah. So again, shorter and sharper rather than, again, the higher intensity, the more stress you place on your body, higher your cortisol. So it's, yeah, just a little bit different.
Yeah. And so when you talk about nutritional intake and you talk about quality, higher protein, what does that actually look like? What kinds of foods should women be looking to consume as they move into this perimenopause phase?
Yep. So your quality proteins are, you know, your lean meat, so lean chicken and steaks and cottage cheese or eggs, whole sources from whole foods, pretty much. However, I don't like to recommend certain foods for people because every food is quite specialized, I think. So if you are having gut issues, again, it's really important to reach out to someone who can tell you what types of foods are going to be best for you. Yeah, but generally, I like to say, if it comes from the, you know, ocean, if it comes from a tree, if it comes from the ground, it's going to be much better for you than if it comes out of a packet or from a shop as well, because you don't know what types of oils they've used. A lot of fast foods use, you know, the seed oils, which are your omega-6s and 9s, which actually are pro-inflammatory. They create inflammation in your body rather than the omega-3s, which are, you know, your cold-pressed olive oils and avocados and, you know, from salmon and all that kind of, the good omega-3s. So they're anti-inflammatory. Yeah.
And what about sleep? How important is
Huge.
sleep?
Huge. So again, that's our recovery time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when our body actually recovers and lowers. There's they brain actually clears itself out too. So they've done studies to show that people who don't sleep that well are more likely to develop, I think it's developed Alzheimer's or dementia, because again, the brain's not clearing out the proteins and flushing it out. So if too, when you're not sleeping, your cortisol's higher, you tend to be more hungrier. Yeah, sleep is really important.
And what about things like, particularly in those perimenopause stages, what about things like coffee, alcohol? Can you talk
Yes.
about those?
So again, I suppose women can be more sensitive to caffeine, and especially when we're in our luteal phase, we are more sensitive to caffeine. So for someone, having coffee maybe after 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock may actually disrupt your sleep. So it may keep you, awake, so that you're not getting a good sleep or getting into deep REM sleep. And alcohol is the same. You might think it's relaxing you,
yes,
but it is actually disturbing your sleep, as well as making your liver not function properly. So the body will actually break down liver first before it metabolizes your hormones. So it's really important as we age.
yes,
Yes, not to be consuming that, I think, anyway.
yes,
Having that glass of alcohol every night. I tell most of my patients, especially the women that are in menopause, swap your glass of red wine for maybe a glass of tart cherry juice, because it will actually help raise or increase your own natural melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. It's actually good for helping our joints and inflammation in our joints. And if you put it on the rocks, on ice, it can help cool your body down too, before you go to sleep. So,
yeah, what a great idea.
Yeah.
Never even heard of that.
Oh. It's good for arthritis. Yeah, it's good for arthritis. Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's sometimes the habit, of sitting down with that glass and sipping on something. So it's not about kind of taking it away. It's kind of about, just changing it to something different.
Yeah,
So,
I think being really intentional about our choices and also being really hyper aware of the season that we're in and the physical aspects and changes happening in our body, and then bringing in the tools for how we can best navigate that season. Because many women move through perimenopause, and because it does last or can last for women for such a significant period of time, that's a long period of time to be trying to navigate really severe symptoms and whatever they may be, and it's so varied. So to have this knowledge and this understanding of what's happening at a physical level and how that's then impacting our emotions and our nervous system and how that's affecting our brain and our sleep cycles and all of these things, we can start to shift and modify our patterns of behavior so that we know at least then we're doing everything to support the phase that we're in, and we really can't do any more than that. Right?
Well, that's it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But definitely, I think the sleep is a huge one. Getting to bed kind of before, 10. I have some women that are like, oh, I stay up till 1 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you function the next day?
Yeah.
So having a bed routine, like, when you have a child, you'll give your child a bed routine. It's like, okay, it's 7 o'clock, time to have a shower, time to clean your teeth, time for a bedtime story to wind down. And then they go to sleep. It's like, but when we get older, we don't do that to ourselves. We'll stay out late, keep eating and drinking, even eating late, like can disrupt your sleep. So and again, that will vary from person to person. But for me, I need to have it cleared 2 hours of not eating before I go to sleep. Otherwise, it does tend to keep me up. Yeah. So again, going, okay, I need to stop eating by this time. Okay, I'm going to have a warm shower or a cool shower just to settle my body down. I'm going to stretch, or I'm going to read. And then I'm going to, you know, making sure your room's dark, making sure your room's cool. We've just also put in our room an air filter because I don't breathe very well. So just little things like that, again, to make your environment an environment where you can get the best sleep possible, so then you can wake up feeling energized and ready to go. Yeah, definitely a huge game changer.
And so when is your next competition? What aspect of your training are you in right now?
I'm in improvement season.
Yeah.
Yeah, so trying to push hard for the next 6 months.
Yep.
To try and grow my legs a little bit more, create a little bit more shape. But again, navigating around, you know, making sure that my health stays optimal. So I've just recently had, I've actually just done 6 months through a gut process of phase 1 with a guy called Dave O'Brien. That was very interesting. He looked at my bloods, compared it to gut health. And we found that we had candida and yeast overgrowth, heavy metal toxicity, low cortisol, methylation issues. So there were a few things that a normal doctor will not pick up. A normal doctor, and the doctor actually looked at my bloods and was like, "You're fine.
Everything's normal."
And it was just like, yeah, how come I feel so crap? So yeah, you know, again, getting the right people to look at your bloods is so important. So yeah, I've got my energy back. We're ready to push. So training will be, you know, 4 to 5 days. And then recovery, making sure recovery using cold showers, which is getting hard in
Melbourne winter.
Getting the most out of my nutrition. So making sure I've got the right amount of protein for my body, making sure I've got all those other nutrients, because you can be micro deficient, and that can cause, you know, problems if you're not eating, you know, the colors of the rainbow. But for me, I've still got a bit of a candida and yeast overgrowth, so making sure that I'm eating low sulfur foods, certain vegetables I need to stick to, staying away from all the fruits and stuff. I know it sounds extreme, but again, if you're wanting optimal health, it sometimes does mean that you need to stay away from certain foods, because not all foods are going to be right for you.
Yes.
And that's where getting, you know, specialists to help you in the direction is so important. So yeah, just making sure I train as hard as I can every day, and recover as hard as I can, listening to my body. Like if I do need to take an extra rest day, taking that day. Also making sure I get regular treatments, because it's your body's just like a machine. It's like, you know, your car. After it's done a certain amount of kilometers, it needs a tune up and oil and a wheel alignment, you know.
Yes, I think we can see our bodies as we move into perimenopause as exactly that. You know, we've lived a half of our life potentially for many of us. And so if we think about the body then as the car, then it's, you know, it's halfway to its end of life, and it does require then additional services and additional care taken to look after it, to make sure that it has, you know, that it maintains optimal mileage, etc., through till end of life. So if we see that as the same as women, then, you know, it's really when self-care and things should really be upped, and yet it's often a time when the self-care is less so.
I think it depends on if you've had children or not. Yeah, for me, I feel like because I haven't had a child, from my 40s, I've been able to really know who I am, dive in and give myself more care. I'm over the partying and the drinking, and so nurturing, you know, my body is my number one priority. But I think too, like when women do have children, their body changes so much. That's 9 months of carrying another human that changes the shape of the body,
Yeah.
that center of gravity shifts. So, and for some women, their body does adapt back quite well. For other women, it doesn't. And so, getting help to either treatment wise, to release off the tight muscles and improve the movement of everything, and strength training, making sure you're getting the right help again, to make sure that everything's moving in the right direction.
Yes. And many women are choosing to have choosing to have children, or not even choosing, but as it turns out, with infertility on the rise, it means that many women are having their first child later in life.
Right.
So by the time they hit this perimenopause phase, they may still have quite young children in their care. And so, yeah, it is really individual. And I think we just need to, I think, regardless of what season we're in, from whether we're in our 20s to whether we're in our late 40s, that we really tend to the needs of our body, of our nervous system, as a high priority.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think keeping it strong, because if you keep your body strong, then it gives you they say fill your cup up first.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're keeping yourself strong, then you've got more to give to your family and your children. Wow.
Yes, agree. How can women connect with you? In person, online? I know you're Dr. Rebecca Rowe, osteopath, on Instagram. Where can they find you if they want to come in for a treatment or want to reach out for some support in optimal strength training for them?
Yeah, so they can DM me on my Instagram or my Facebook page. I think my Facebook's Rebecca Rowe. I'm currently working in South Melbourne at the Centre for Musculoskeletal Medicine. So yes, if they want to come in for a treatment, they can do that. Or otherwise, just DM me and then we can work out the best option that's going to help you.
Great. Thank you for such a rich and knowledgeable discussion around perimenopause, endometriosis, strength training, and all the good things.
Thank you, Kate, for having me.
My pleasure.